The Rust Belt city of Brighton, Michigan holds a dark secret that the locals refuse to discuss in the daylight. Deep within the overgrown woods stands the skeletal remains of Bond's Burgers, a family restaurant that vanished from the map in the late 1970s. Once a place of laughter and cheap pizza, it now resembles a tomb made of rotting wood and shattered glass. The air around the building stays unnaturally cold, even during the humid American summers. Most people avoid the area, fearing the legends of the mechanical blue rabbit that supposedly still wanders the dark, silent corridors tonight. Inside the building, the smell of grease has been replaced by the stench of damp mold and something metallic like old blood. Shadows stretch long across the checkered floor, where broken arcade machines sit like gravestones. In the center of the main stage, a massive silhouette stands perfectly still under a single leak in the ceiling. It is Bond the Bunny, a 7-foot-tall animatronic with matted blue fur and wide, unblinking eyes. Unlike the friendly mascots seen in modern theme parks, Bond's face is frozen in a wide, jagged grin that feels more like a threat than a welcome. The machinery inside Bond is not like a normal robot. It is a chaotic mess of hydraulic pistons and sharp steel frames. Legend says that the creator, Jack Walten, disappeared shortly after the bunny was built, leaving behind a legacy of mechanical nightmares. When the moonlight hits the animatronic's plastic eyes, they seem to twitch with a spark of artificial intelligence. There are no batteries left in his system, yet local teenagers swear they have heard the whirring of motors coming from inside the stage. Something is keeping the blue rabbit alive, fueled by a dark, forgotten energy. In 1982, a night security guard named Brian was hired to watch the site before its planned demolition. He entered the building with a heavy flashlight and a radio, thinking it was an easy job for a paycheck. As he walked past the dining area, he noticed the stage curtain was slightly open. He shined his light onto the platform, but the blue rabbit was gone. The heavy metal stand where the robot usually sat was empty, showing only deep scratches in the wood. Brian's heart began to race as he realized something massive was moving in the darkness behind him. Every step Brian took echoed loudly through the hollow restaurant, but he could hear a second set of footsteps following him. It was a heavy, rhythmic thud, the sound of metal feet hitting the floorboards with immense force. He turned a corner and saw a flash of blue fur disappearing into the kitchen. The rabbit wasn't just moving, it was hunting him with a calculated, predatory patience. Brian tried to call for help on his radio, but all he heard was static mixed with a distorted, slowed-down recording of a child's birthday song playing on a loop. The animatronic's design is disturbingly human-like in its proportions, making its jerky, mechanical movements even more terrifying to witness. Bond's arms are long, ending in oversized fingers that were meant to hold a guitar, but now look like rusted claws. His jaw hangs slightly loose, revealing rows of small, blunt teeth that were never meant for eating. As Brian hid behind a collapsed booth, he watched the shadow of the rabbit grow larger on the wall. The creature didn't breathe, but it made a clicking sound every time its glass eyes adjusted their focus in the dark. The terrifying reality of Bon is that he is broken in a way that makes him dangerous to anything living. His programming has become corrupted over decades of neglect, leading him to believe that every human he encounters is a broken part that needs fixing. In his mechanical mind, fixing means taking the person apart and stuffing them into a spare animatronic suit. This process is not quick or painless. It is a brutal collision of flesh and sharp machinery. The Blue Rabbit does not feel hate. It simply follows a twisted logic of restoration. Brian finally reached the back exit, but the heavy steel door was chained from the outside to keep trespassers out. He screamed for help, his voice cracking in the dusty air, but the nearest house was miles away. Behind him, the clicking sound grew louder, accompanied by the smell of rotting fabric and old oil. Bon emerged from the shadows of the hallway, his blue fur stained with dark patches of ancient grime. The robot's head tilted to the side at a sharp, unnatural angle as it studied the terrified man cowering against the locked door. The rabbit reached out a heavy hand, its movements shaking with the vibration of old gears. As its fingers touched Brian's shoulder, the man felt the incredible weight and power of the machine. It wasn't just a toy, it was hundreds of pounds of industrial steel. Bon began to speak, but the voice wasn't his own. It was a collection of pre-recorded clips from the 1970s, stitched together to form a haunting sentence. "You look beautiful," the machine garbled in a deep, flickering electronic tone that vibrated through Brian's very bones. The struggle was short and violent as the animatronic dragged the man back toward the parts and service room. Brian's flashlight fell to the floor, its beam illuminating the trail of dust being kicked up as he was pulled into the darkness. Inside the small room, several empty suits hung from the ceiling like hollowed-out carcasses. There was a sheep, a bird, and another rabbit, all waiting for repairs. Bon lifted Brian with ease, placing him onto a cold metal table surrounded by various sharp tools and rusted animatronic skeletons. The process of becoming beautiful began as Bon reached for a spare mechanical endoskeleton lying on the workbench. The room was filled with the sounds of snapping metal and the horrific screams of the guard as the machine began its work. Bon didn't stop when things got messy. He simply continued to match the human limbs to the steel frame. He worked with the precision of a clockmaker, ignoring the pleas for mercy. To Bon, he was simply performing his duty to the restaurant, ensuring that the show would go on forever. By the time the sun began to rise over the Michigan trees, the screaming had stopped. The restaurant was silent once again, save for the sound of a single fan spinning slowly in the office. On the stage, the Blue Rabbit sat back in his original position, his hands folded neatly on his lap. However, there was a new addition to the back room, a new animatronic suit that hadn't been there the day before. It sat slumped in the corner, its plastic eyes staring blankly at the wall, forever trapped in a mechanical nightmare. The police arrived a few days later after Brian failed to return home, but they found no sign of a struggle. They walked through the dining hall, their boots clicking on the floor, and noted that everything seemed to be in its place. One officer commented on how creepy the Blue Rabbit looked, but he didn't notice the wet, dark liquid dripping slowly from the bottom of the stage. They concluded that Brian had simply walked away from the job, leaving his flashlight and radio behind in a fit of boredom. Years passed, and the forest eventually reclaimed the ruins of Bon's Burgers. The roof collapsed, and the walls crumbled into piles of brick and mortar, burying the secrets of the Walten family deep underground.
Yet, hikers in the area still report seeing a tall, blue figure standing among the trees during the new moon. They say the figure doesn't move like a person. It moves with the stiff, jerky motions of a machine. They call it the Ghost of Brighton, a reminder of a business that died but refused to disappear.
The legend of Bon the Bunny remains one of the most disturbing tales in American urban folklore. It serves as a warning about the dangers of mixing human souls with cold, unfeeling technology. While the restaurant is gone, the hunger of the Blue Rabbit remains unsatisfied, waiting for the next curious soul to wander into his territory. If you ever find yourself in the woods of Michigan and hear the sound of a distorted birthday song, do not stop to listen. Run as fast as you can, or you might become beautiful too.